Numerology and Gematria in the biblical period. Why did the ancients take numbers so seriously? This is the first question you'll be asked whenever you teach numerology in the Bible. I've done this a number of times with Revelation or with the Gospels or the book of Daniel, for example, and people always wonder, why do the biblical writers play these number games? Why do they take numbers so seriously? So I want to take a few minutes to try to get at the rationale behind ancient numerology. The first reason they took numbers so seriously is because they thought God had ordered time in a numerical way. The numerical ordering of time was ultimately based on observations related to the sun, moon, festivals, and other cultic acts that pertain to the formation of calendars. Think 12 hours in a solar day. Think 30 days in a lunar month. And think about the numerical attachments to festivals. Pentecost, for example, is 50 days after the barley harvest that follows immediately upon Passover. And what you have, according to New Testament scholar Adela Yarbo Collins, is the projection of common time onto prophetic time. A good example of this is Jeremiah's 70 years. He says that God is going to send the Babylonians to take the children of Judah into exile for 70 years. Well, 2 Chronicles 36:21 explains this, that they had disregarded the Shemitah 70 times. The Shemitah was a Sabbath of years. Every 7 years, you were supposed to let the land rest. You were not supposed to sow seed. Well, since they refused to do this, now they have a debt, as it were. They owe the land 70 years of rest. And so they're going to be taken into exile, and then they're going to come back, but only after 70 years. Now, Jeremiah's 70 years of exile becomes something very serious and eschatological in the book of Daniel. Daniel says it's not 70 years, but it's 70 times 7. And at the end of 70 times 7, 490 years, the kingdom of God will arrive. Now, this becomes very pervasive in ancient Jewish thought. The Damascus document, found with the Dead Sea Scrolls, also has 490 years. 11Q Melchizedek has 10 Jubilees, but if you count up 10 Jubilees, it's also 490 years. And in the book of Enoch, you have the 4 periods of 70 shepherds. The shepherds are these fallen angels that rule over the nations of the world, and now they have power over God's people whenever they are in exile, and when the exile ends, the kingdom of God will arrive. Other examples include the apocalypse of 2nd Baruch, where black and bright rain pour alternatively for 12 times, which covers the span of human history. 12 rungs in Jacob's ladder. In 4th Ezra, you have 12 parts of history, 12 wings for the appearance of the Messiah. All of these 12s are probably based either on the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 months, or 12 hours in a day. And so they're taking common time and projecting it onto prophetic time. Other texts like Barnabas and 2nd Enoch have sabbatical eschatology, where history can be 6,000 years for 6 days and then 1,000 years of a messianic kingdom, or indeed a Sabbath that goes on forever. Another reason they took numbers so seriously is they believed God numerically ordered space and matter. A good example of this is what in pagan philosophy, such as in Plato or Pythagoras before him, was known as the Sevenfold Principle of the universe. They tended to think that the universe had been set up in sets of 7 planets, for example, or 7 holes in your head, your ears, your nose, your mouth, and your eyes, 7 phases of the moon, and other processes, other physical processes that we in the modern world wouldn't necessarily divide up into sets of 7. They also thought of 7 in terms of its unique numerical characteristics, and other numbers had unique numerical characteristics as well. And one of the things about 7 is it's the first number that is neither begotten nor does it beget. So begotten means, since 2 is the number of reproduction, that you cannot get the number 7 by multiplying an integer times 2. So 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 3 is 6, and there's no integer that you can multiply by 2 to get 7. So in this sense, the ancients thought that the number 7 was not begotten. It does not beget either, because if you multiply 2 against 7, you do not stay within the decade. That is, you don't stay within the first 10 numbers. And this is significant to ancient thinkers. And so 7 is very interesting because it is neither begotten nor does it beget. Well, if the world of pagan philosophy is thinking about the number of 7 so deeply, and Jews are trying to promote the worship of the one true God and worship as it's conceived of in the law of Moses, well, they have all these 7s. They have the Sabbath day. They have the Sabbath year. And so this becomes a selling point. What you guys call the sevenfold principle of the universe is true in the Bible as well. And in this way, they begin to engage with the world outside of Judaism. Now, obviously related to this is the common Jewish notion that philosophy derived from Moses. Some Jewish thinkers even thought that the best ancient philosophers from Greece had learned their philosophy from Moses, and others just simply thought that the wisdom that you found in philosophy would receive its purest embodiment within the biblical text. And even the Apostle Paul is not altogether foreign to this idea. He quotes a pagan poet, a philosopher, when he talks to the people at Athens and tells them, in him we live and move and have our being. As even some of your own poets have said, we are indeed his offspring. And so when you see that Jews had long since thought that philosophy was ultimately derived from Moses, and indeed you even see some thinking like this in the book of Acts, this becomes a license for ancient Jews and ancient Christians to begin to engage with numbers in a very serious way in the biblical text. Why? Well, because philosophers were engaged with numbers. If philosophy is wisdom, and the best philosophy and the best wisdom should be found in the biblical text, then the type of numerical games that we find in philosophy are also going to turn up in biblical studies. Then there's numerical meaning in the Hebrew Bible itself. Right? Think of 40 days and 40 nights, 40 years in the wilderness. Jesus having 40 days of temptation in Matthew 4 and Luke 4. There are already numerical patterns in the Hebrew Bible. So even if we just set philosophy aside, set aside Paul's engagement with the philosophers at Athens and everything they were doing with numbers, we already see that there are numerical patterns in the Hebrew Bible, and this is an invitation to Bible-believing people in the ancient world to investigate numbers and to take their meaning seriously. Then you have name theology. In the modern world, we don't tend to take the meaning of names so seriously, but the ancient world was not this way, including the ancient biblical world. Now, take my name, for example, a 13th century Latin name, Justin, and if we look at the meanings of the name, we can see that they are all obviously right. They all obviously say something about my character as it factually is. For example, the just one, or the morally upright person, or the righteous one. These are all outstanding names for me. My favorite is the one that I have highlighted, the one who is in the right. Now, I have told my wife that she is to address me this way because this is my name. I'm the one who is in the right. But so far, she's proven to be a stubborn and rebellious woman. She just won't call me by my name. Now, on a more serious note, think of passages like Genesis 32, where Jacob is wrestling with the angel of the Lord, and he tells him to give us his name, and the angel of the Lord will not reveal his name to Jacob. There are a number of passages like this where names are very important and they are very powerful. So if you take in Hebrew or Greek a person's name, every letter is also a number. And so you count up the letters of your name, and you get a number. That is the number of your name. So if you already think that the meaning of a person's name can be highly significant, then it's only a short step in logic to suggest that the number of a person's name can also be significant. And so when it comes to counting up the number of a person's name, this is significant because names mean something. Names say something about the way you are, or potentially how you can be. Numerical study also helped in dealing with uninteresting or offensive texts. I'll give you an example from the New Testament. In John chapter 3, you find that Jesus is compared to the serpent that Moses put on a pole. Now, you can both see why he would want to make this comparison, and you can see why he wouldn't, or why it's so surprising to people that he would. Because everybody who looks on the serpent who's raised on the pole is saved. Now, comparing that to Jesus who's raised up on a cross and being saved, you can see why he would like to make this comparison. But it's always surprised people that despite this similarity of being raised up and saving people, that Jesus would be compared to a snake. Snakes don't exactly get the best reputation in the biblical tradition. Well, the numbers might help us smooth out this problem and explain why this comparison is made. The word nachash, the word for serpent, is a nun, a het, and a sheen, which has a total value of 358. The word Messiah is a mem, a sheen, a yod, and a het, having a total value of 358. And so some scholars have thought that while it might be somewhat difficult to make a comparison between a serpent and Jesus, well, if you're thinking like an ancient person and you think that the number of a name means something, well, Messiah and serpent, they have the same numerical value. This is called isosophy when you compare two names that have the same numerical value. And it's so interesting that most of the New Testament writers will simply translate the word Messiah into Christos, the anointed one. Well, John's Gospel alone will actually write out the Hebrew word in Greek, Messias, which you have in John 1 and in John 4. Well, right in between the two places where he uses this word, we get Jesus compared to the serpent. And so it's interesting that this possible number game based on the word Messiah would fall in John chapter 3, since he actually uses the Hebrew word for Messiah on either side of this episode. Another interesting example is from the rabbis who are talking about the name Satan, Hasatan. Hasatan has a value of 364, and the rabbis were trying to figure out what this means. And they end up telling us that it has to do with the Day of Atonement. There are 365 days in a year, they reason, and 364 is the number of the prosecutor's name because there is only one day in which he does not have a license to prosecute God's people, and it's on the Day of Atonement. And that's why his name reflects the number of days in a year minus one, because he has no authority on the Day of Atonement. And then finally, discoveries were possible and taken seriously. If a person was wise, or if they were chosen or favored by God, then God could show them special knowledge through numerical discoveries in sacred texts. I'll end by giving you this example from 3rd Baruch. This is a Jewish writer in the late 1st century, and he's trying to work out problems in the cosmos. And he talks about the sea dragon, which is discussed in a lot of ancient Jewish texts. And in his version of the story, the sea dragon devours the wicked. And he uses this to resolve the conundrum from Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes, the writer wants to know, if all streams run into the sea, why is the sea never full? Well, our writer says that the sea dragon drinks 1 cubit from the sea every day. And how is this significant? Well, it's because if you take the word for dragon, transliterate it into Hebrew, and add up the value of the letters, it has a total of 360. So what's going on here? Well, it's not just a game that he's playing. He thinks he's really discovered something. He has accepted a tradition that says there are 360 rivers flowing into the underworld. And he discovers that the word dragon, in terms of the sea dragon, his name has a value of 360. So as the rivers flow into the underworld, the dragon drinks the water. The 360 rivers is balanced out by the dragon whose name has a value of 360. And so to him, this is not silly. He thinks he's really discovered why the ocean does not fill up and spill over onto the continents, because the dragon has the right number in his name to consume the water of the 360 rivers. And so I have other videos that you can check out if you like, in Revelation, in John's Gospel, in Matthew, and the genealogy of Jesus is full of numerical stuff. Ancient people took numbers very seriously, and some of our most sophisticated and interesting number games occur in the New Testament.